I was wanting to do something a little bit different on my channel. We just got back from a trip to Washington, D.C., and I was wanting to give a review on that and give some suggestions. It's a great family vacation. I would highly recommend it if you have kids that are 5th grade and above. I know my son Tanis, he's a 5th grader, or was a 5th grader last year, and they learned a lot about American history, so a lot of the things he could give us, he could talk about, knew about, so that was a great he's a great age to take to go to Washington, D.C. 3rd and 4th graders, they'd probably do just as well, and then they'd have that background knowledge. I don't know any younger than 3rd grade. It's a little bit, I don't know. I would just recommend 3rd grade and above, 5th grade definitely, to go on this trip. So I just wanted to get started with talking a little bit about before you go, things that I would recommend doing. And it starts 6 months in advance, because if you'd like to do some of the tours they have at the Pentagon or the Capitol or the White House, you have to put requests in for those 6 months in advance with your state legislatures. So we were actually able to get tickets for the Pentagon tour, a private Capitol tour, and also a White House tour. We did some research. What you would have to do if you have a child that is going to do the White House tour for you, you have to get them an identification to the DMV and get them a photo ID. For the Pentagon and Capitol tour, they don't need that. Unfortunately, when we made the reservations, we had the date wrong for the White House tour. So we got tickets to those, but it was the date after it was the week after we left, so we weren't able to do the White House, but we were able to do the Pentagon and the Capitol, which were wonderful. And I would highly recommend doing that. It's worth the time if you're going to Washington, D.C. A couple other things before you leave, some recommendations I have for what you might want to pack. You will definitely need to take some comfortable shoes, because you will be doing a lot of walking. And even with comfortable shoes, my feet were hurting really bad by the end of the day. Another thing I recommend is sunscreen, because you are outside a lot of the time, and there is a lot of shade, but I always want to make sure that we're all covered with sunscreen. I carry a pretty big purse, so one of the things I needed to do is go out and get myself just a little something to have, put my essentials in and carry with me, so I wasn't lugging around a huge purse the whole day. So this was a lifesaver. I'm so glad I went out and got this. This was just like a little $12 purse I got at actually one of the museums we went to in St. Louis. And then another thing that I would recommend is if you can take like a little backpack with you, if you want to throw some snacks in there, or your sunscreen if you think you need to do that. And then you can wear it around your back. This one doesn't have a zipper. It has a tie at the top. But that worked really well also. So those are the things just my recommendations for pre-planning your trip. So we started off in Oklahoma on Friday night after work, and we drove 6 hours to get to St. Louis to get a little bit of traveling under our belt. We decided to go ahead and stay in St. Louis for most of the day on Saturday, and we did 2 things that were really, really fun. The first thing I really recommend for you if you have kids is the City Museum, and this is a magnet I got there, and it is basically a cross between an artist and a mechanical engineer got together and built this place for kids. It is wonderful. My son was he's like, we should just come to St. Louis to go to this place. He thought it was great. We've been to lots of children's museums, and this one was different than any that I've ever been to before. The main difference was they basically built some really cool things that kids could crawl in and around, and you were crawling up toward the ceiling. They had this big, huge cave area where you were crawling. Any time there was a little hole or something, you could crawl into it, and you wouldn't know where you would pop out at. So there was all these, you'd be walking around, and all of a sudden a kid would crawl out from under, be in front of you, crawling out of a hole, or crawling out of a hole beside you. It was really, really fun. They had this huge place up on the roof that you could crawl in these metal areas that I started crawling up one, and then I looked down, which was a mistake. It was kind of scary, but it was fun. Great place to go, not that expensive. Another thing Tanis really liked was they had a a 10-story slide. It was a spiral slide that you went down. It took quite a while. I was dizzy by the time I got to the end of it, but it was really fun. So if you're ever in the St. Louis area, the City Museum is definitely worth going to. The other place we wanted to mark off our bucket list was to go to the St. Louis Arch. So we went there. You grabbed tickets outside of the Arch, and then it took 20 minutes before we could get in line to get into the museum gift shop area, which is actually underneath the ground. And then you had to wait to get in another line to actually get in the line to go into the the tram that goes up to the top of the arch. So basically, we were in line for about an hour and a half to go up to the top and look out, which was an amazing view, and come down, which probably took a total of 20 minutes. So I would definitely recommend going on a weekday, because I think the weekend it was really packed and busy. But we're glad we went, and then we ate dinner at one of the restaurants that was near there, which was really good. We ate outside, and so that's always fun. But I got a magnet to put on my fridge with our bucket list item of the Gateway Arch. So from St. Louis, we got a couple of hours driving that day. That was on Saturday. We drove, and then Sunday we drove. It was our big driving day. So we drove all the way till we got an hour outside of Washington, D.C. So we got up Monday. That was the day that we had our room reservation for Embassy Suites, and we were meeting Pete's parents there. So we got up and drove there, and we were able to check in early. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about where we stayed, because it was such a great experience. They were so friendly there, great recommendations. I really loved the fact that they had a free breakfast every morning, and it wasn't just a continental breakfast. It had an omelet bar, it had a hot bar, it had fresh fruit, yogurt, cereal, coffee, orange juice. It was just really great. So every morning we'd start our day with a really good breakfast, and we didn't have to worry about paying for that. So that was nice. And then at the end of the day, around, I think it was 5:30, they'd have drinks and snacks that you could go and have, and you could get, they had a couple of drinks listed that you can get, or, and then they had this big snack bar that had chips, salsa, I think they had Fritos, they had, I can't remember what all they had, but I know one day they had a bowl of M&Ms and a bowl of gummy bears, and the kids' eyes were just like huge, and they were going over and filling their little bowl up with all of these M&Ms and gummy bears, and I think that was just great that it wasn't just meant for adults, it was meant for a family. So they had drinks there for the kids to drink, but you could also get your adult beverage also. So that was great. I guess the only thing I would say that I didn't like about the Embassy Suites was their pool is really, really small, and there was a lot of people. Janice was wanting to swim, and we went down there, and it was just like you couldn't even go and swim. There was too many people for this little pool. So that was really the only complaint I have about that. But that was okay, because we were there to do everything else, and the swimming was just the bonus. So we got to swim when we were traveling, so that was fine. So once we got settled into our room, we decided to go to Ford's Theater, which is the site where President Lincoln was shot, and I do highly recommend going to this. You have to go inside and get a ticket, and then you stand outside in the line, and you think it's going to take forever, but it doesn't, because it actually has different like show times, and so you all go into this big group, and then one of the park rangers gets up and talks about what happened in a story like kind of like a story, which was really interesting. It kept Tanis's attention, and they have it. The theater is recreated to look just like it did when Lincoln was shot. And then they talk about how he was taken over to across the street where he actually died. And then after you go through that, you can go across the street and go through the house where he actually died at. So we didn't do that, so I can't give you many details about that, but definitely a really cool place to go see and get a little history. Another thing that was really fun we did that night was we went to the International Spy Museum, which I again, highly recommend. This was the thing that we had to spend the most money on. It did cost quite a bit. And basically what it is it has definitely a museum where you can go and you can see lots of things, but there's also a simulation if you have kids that are 12 and older that you can go through where you're trying to figure out solve a mystery basically, and you go through all these different rooms as a group, and I don't know, it's really, really cool, and if you ever get a chance to go there, I would definitely recommend it. I'm going to stop this video right now because I'm already at over 10 minutes, and because that was our day 1 at Washington, D.C., and I'm going to do the other days in another video, so I will be right back with you.